Most people don't understand this, but the habit of explaining yourself is one of the biggest reasons you feel drained, misunderstood, and quietly disrespected in life. It doesn't feel like weakness when you're doing it. It feels reasonable. It feels mature. It feels like you're just trying to be fair. But under the surface, something else is happening. Every time you explain yourself when nobody asked, you hand away a piece of your power. Think about how it usually starts. Someone questions you, not loudly, not aggressively, just enough to poke at you. A comment that sounds casual but isn't. A look that feels loaded. A sentence that makes you feel like you're being judged. And instantly, something tightens inside your chest. Your mind speeds up. You feel the urge to fix the situation, to clear the misunderstanding, to make sure they don't think the wrong thing about you. So you start talking, you give reasons, you add details, you say what you meant, you explain your intentions, you bring context. You try to show that you're not careless, not selfish, not wrong, not bad. And the strange thing is, the more you explain, the worse it feels. That's because explaining yourself doesn't calm the situation. It feeds it. It signals uncertainty. It shows that their opinion has weight over you. And people, whether they admit it or not, respond to that signal immediately. The world doesn't reward clarity the way you think it does. It rewards certainty. Certainty isn't loud. It isn't aggressive. It doesn't rush. It doesn't chase understanding. It stands still. When you explain yourself, you're moving toward the other person emotionally. You're saying without words, please see me the way I want to be seen. That puts you in a lower position. It makes you reactive. And once you're reactive, the balance shifts. Most people live their entire lives in that reactive state. Someone is unhappy, they apologize. Someone is disappointed, they overcompensate. Someone criticizes them, they scramble to defend their character. They think this makes them good people. In reality, it makes them exhausted people. Because now you're not just responsible for your actions. You're responsible for everyone's perception of you. And that's an impossible job. The need to explain yourself doesn't come from confidence. It comes from fear. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of being judged. Fear of losing approval. And that fear didn't start now. It started early. As a child, when an adult accused you of something, what did you do? You explained. You begged. You tried to show that you were good. You learned that authority figures decided your safety. If they believed you, you were okay. If they didn't, there were consequences. So your nervous system learned a rule. Explaining equals survival. But you're not a child anymore. The problem is, your body doesn't know that. So now when your boss questions you, your body reacts like a parent is angry. When your partner accuses you, your body reacts like you're about to be punished. When a stranger online attacks you, your body reacts like your social standing is under threat. And instead of choosing calm, you explain. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The more you explain yourself, the more people feel entitled to question you. Because explaining places you in the role of the one being evaluated. You don't notice it happening, but the dynamic changes. You become the one seeking approval. They become the one granting or withholding it. That's why some people seem to invite criticism no matter what they do. It's not bad luck, it's energy, it's posture, it's the invisible signal that says, you can judge me. People who are grounded don't send that signal. They don't rush to justify themselves. They don't volunteer excuses. They don't panic when misunderstood. They let silence work. Silence is uncomfortable because it removes the structure people rely on. Most conversations are built on back and forth reactions. When you stop reacting, the structure collapses. Imagine someone says, "You're really inconsiderate." Most people instantly jump in. "What? No, I'm not. I just didn't reply because I was busy and yesterday That response gives the accusation weight. It treats it like a valid charge that deserves a defense. Now imagine instead you pause, you breathe, you look at them calmly, you say nothing. That silence forces them to sit with what they just said. It removes your participation. It makes them responsible for the energy they created. Most people can't handle that. They start talking again. They soften their tone. They clarify. They backtrack. You didn't argue. You didn't submit. You didn't escalate. You simply refuse to carry the moment for them. This is what emotional independence looks like. It doesn't mean you never speak. It means when you do speak, it's not from panic. It's not from the need to be seen as good. It's not from the fear of being misunderstood. You speak because you choose to. Another powerful shift happens when you stop explaining your intentions. Intentions are invisible. You know what you meant. You know why you did something. Explaining intentions is an attempt to control how someone feels about your actions. But here's the reality. You cannot manage other people's interpretations. Trying to do so only weakens you. Strong people let their actions speak over time. They don't rush to clean up every misunderstanding. They trust consistency. Sometimes the most disarming response isn't silence, but simple agreement. Not agreement that collapses you, but agreement that removes the fight. Someone says, "You messed this up." Instead of saying, "Well, actually I did it that way because," you say, "Yeah, that did land the way I wanted." And you stop. Notice what you didn't do. You didn't accept shame. You didn't accept a label. You didn't defend your identity. You acknowledged reality and kept your dignity. That shows strength. Only insecure people fight desperately to protect their image. Secure people can admit mistakes without losing themselves. When you don't resist unnecessarily, the attack loses momentum. There's nothing to push against. It's like throwing a punch into fog. Another way people lose power is by answering questions that are actually accusations in disguise. Questions like, "Why would you do that?" or "What were you thinking?" Those aren't genuine questions. They're judgments wearing a question mark. You don't owe those questions an answer. Instead of explaining, you can redirect calmly. What part of this concerns you? Or what made that stand out to you? Or even just interesting? Those responses shift the focus. They remove you from the defendant's chair. They turn the attention back onto the other person's reaction. You're not being rude. You're being selective. Here's something most people never realize. When someone pushes you to explain yourself, they're often trying to regulate their own emotions through you. They're uncomfortable. They're irritated. They want relief. And they want you to provide it by justifying yourself. When you refuse, they have to deal with their feelings alone. That's not cruelty. That's boundaries. You are not responsible for soothing other people's discomfort. When you stop taking responsibility for how others feel about you, something shifts internally. You become calmer, slower, more deliberate. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You stop replaying moments where you think you said the wrong thing. You realize you don't need to be perfectly understood to be at peace. A lot of people confuse explaining with honesty, but honesty doesn't require oversharing. It doesn't require justification. It doesn't require you to open your internal world to scrutiny. You can be honest and still be reserved. You can be kind and still be firm. You can be open and still be unmoved. The reason insults hurt is not because they're powerful. It's because they touch something unresolved. When someone calls you something you've already accepted within yourself, it doesn't sting. If someone calls you imperfect, you shrug. Of course you are, everyone is. If someone calls you flawed, you nod. That's human. You only defend what you're afraid of. So the deeper work isn't just learning what to say or not say. It's learning yourself, owning your shadows, accepting your imperfections without shame. When you stop pretending to be flawless, nobody can expose you. When you stop hiding parts of yourself, nobody can threaten you with them. That's real confidence. This is why some people seem untouchable. Not because they're perfect, but because they're honest with themselves. They're not trying to maintain a fragile image. They don't need to explain who they are. They already know. Try this experiment for a few days. Notice how often you add extra words. How often you explain things nobody questioned. How often you soften statements out of fear of reaction. Then start removing the excess. Say less, pause more, Let moments breathe. If someone misunderstands you, don't rush to correct it. If someone assumes something about you, let it sit. If someone is disappointed, let them feel it. At first, this will feel uncomfortable. Your body will want to jump in, to fix, to clarify, to smooth things over. Don't sit in the discomfort, let it pass. What replaces it is something stronger than approval, self-respect. And when you have that, the world responds differently to you. People listen more carefully. They choose their words. They sense that you're not easily moved. Not because you're aggressive, but because you're anchored. You don't need to explain yourself to exist. You don't need permission to take up space. You don't need agreement to be whole. Once you truly understand that, silence becomes natural, boundaries become easy, and power stops being something you chase. It becomes something you carry. And here's the part most people don't expect. When you stop explaining yourself, life doesn't fall apart. Relationships don't suddenly explode. The world doesn't turn against you. What actually happens is quieter, subtler, and much more powerful. The people who were only comfortable with you when you were easy to control start to drift. The people who respected you all along stay, and a new category of people appears. People who sense strength without you having to announce it. You begin to notice something strange in conversations. People pause more when they talk to you. They choose their words carefully. They look for your reaction instead of assuming it. This isn't because you're intimidating. It's because you're no longer predictable. And predictability is what manipulators rely on. When someone knows you'll always explain, they can always poke. When someone knows you'll always defend, they can always accuse. But when they don't know what they'll get from you, the game becomes risky for them. Silence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty creates respect. This doesn't mean you become passive. It means you become selective. You stop answering to every sound. You stop reacting to every emotional wave around you. You choose when to engage and when to let things pass. Most people talk too much because they're afraid of being invisible. They think if they don't explain, they'll be ignored. But the opposite is true. The more you talk, the less weight your words carry. When you speak less, people listen more closely. Think about the calmest person you know. The one who rarely reacts, rarely justifies, rarely gets pulled into drama. That person doesn't feel the need to manage how others see them. They don't rush to correct assumptions. They trust time more than arguments. Time reveals character better than explanations ever could. Another thing happens when you stop explaining yourself. You stop lying to yourself. A lot of explanations aren't even for other people. They're for you. They're a way to avoid sitting with discomfort, a way to escape guilt, uncertainty, or self-doubt. When you say, "I did this because," sometimes what you're really saying is, "Please don't think badly of me." And sometimes you don't even believe your own explanation. You're just trying to make the feeling go away. When you stop doing that, you're forced to sit with reality. And reality sharpens you. You become more honest. Not louder, clearer. You start making choices you don't need to justify later. You move with more intention. Because now, you know you won't hide behind words if things feel uncomfortable. This is how integrity is built, quietly. Another subtle shift is how you handle blame. When something goes wrong, you don't rush to defend your image. You don't blame circumstances. You don't blame people. You simply acknowledge what happened and decide what to do next. That attitude confuses people at first. They expect excuses. They expect emotional reactions. When they don't get them, the situation loses heat. Drama needs participation. Without it, it dies. Some people will test you when they feel this change. They'll push harder. They'll say sharper things. Not because you did something wrong, but because your old reactions are gone. They're checking to see if they can still reach you. This is where most people fail. They break. They snap. They explain. They go back to old patterns. If you stay calm here, something important happens. The testing stops because now they know you're not an easy target. And here's a truth that's uncomfortable but necessary. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Not everyone deserves explanations. Not everyone deserves your emotional energy. Explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you is a form of self-betrayal. You don't owe clarity to people who twist it. You don't owe softness to people who use it against you. That doesn't make you cruel. It makes you discerning. Real kindness includes boundaries. Real maturity includes restraint. There's a myth that strong people are loud and dominant. In reality, the strongest people are calm under pressure. They don't rush to assert themselves. They don't fight every battle. They let others reveal themselves. Silence isn't emptiness, it's observation. When you stop filling every gap with words, you start noticing things. You notice who interrupts you, who projects onto you, who needs you to react so they can feel powerful. You see patterns you were too busy explaining to notice before. And once you see those patterns, you stop taking things personally. That's freedom. You also start to notice how often people use emotion as a weapon. They sigh loudly, they act disappointed, they imply things instead of saying them directly. Before, you might have rushed in to fix it. Now you don't. You let them have their feelings. That alone is a massive power shift. You're not cold, you're not distant. You're present without being entangled. You're calm without being detached. This balance is rare, and people feel it. Over time, you'll realize something else. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop overthinking. You stop replaying conversations. You stop wondering if you said the wrong thing. Because you're no longer trying to control the outcome. You accept that not everyone will like you. Not everyone will understand you. And that's okay. Approval stops being currency. Self-respect becomes the standard. And once that happens, you don't need tricks. You don't need clever responses. You don't need dominance games. Your presence does the work. You walk slower. You speak cleaner. You listen deeper. You don't rush to be seen. You allow yourself to be known by those who are patient enough to observe. This is what it means to move like someone who trusts themselves. And the final realization is this: explaining yourself was never about communication. It was about fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being alone. When that fear loosens its grip, you don't become harder. You become lighter. You realize you don't need to convince the world of your worth. You don't need to argue your existence. You don't need to justify your boundaries. You simply live. And that quietly is the most powerful position you can stand in.